The storm came before sunset, rolling over the frontier like a dark warning from the heavens. Across the empty plains, dust rose in twisting lines. The sky turned the color of old iron, and the wind dragged dry grass flat against the earth. On the edge of that lonely land stood a small wooden cabin, half buried in silence, with one lantern burning behind its window. The cabin belonged to Caleb Rourke, a cowboy who had lived alone for so many years that even the townfolk had stopped asking why. He was not a cruel man, but he had learned not to trust easily. The frontier had taken too much from him: his brother in a winter raid, his wife to fever, and his faith in people somewhere between the two. That evening, Caleb was inside sharpening an old knife for cutting rope, not for fighting, when his horse outside suddenly stamped hard against the ground. Caleb lifted his eyes. The wind had changed. Not louder, not softer, just different. Then came the knock. 3 slow hits against the cabin door. Caleb stood still. Nobody came this far after dark unless they were lost, hunted, or dangerous. He reached for his rifle and walked toward the door, his boots creaking against the floorboards. "Who's out there?" he called. For a moment, only wind answered. Then a weak voice came through the storm. "Please, I need shelter." Caleb opened the door just enough to see a man standing in the rain, wrapped in a torn blanket, soaked to the bone, his face hidden beneath wet hair and dust. He looked half dead from exhaustion. Behind him, the open plain was empty. No horse, no wagon, no weapon visible. Caleb kept the rifle low but ready. "Where did you come from?" The stranger lifted his head slowly. His eyes were dark, tired, and full of fear. "From people who want me dead." Caleb stared at him for a long moment. Every lesson the frontier had taught him said to close the door. But something in the man's voice was not the voice of a liar. It was the voice of someone who had already lost almost everything. Caleb stepped aside. "Come in before the storm finishes what they started." The stranger entered slowly, as if he expected kindness to turn into a trap. Caleb shut the door and dropped the wooden bar across it. The cabin was small but warm, with a fire burning low, a pot of beans near the coals, and a bedroll in the corner. The stranger stood near the door, dripping rain onto the floor, his hands shaking from cold. Caleb pointed toward the fire. "Sit." The man obeyed without a word. Caleb placed the rifle against the wall but kept it close. He gave the stranger a dry blanket and poured coffee into a tin cup. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. Only the fire cracked and the storm scratched at the walls. Finally, Caleb said, "Name?" The stranger looked into the flames. "Tahu." Caleb paused. He knew the name was not from any settlement around here. "You from the Red Valley tribe?" Tahu did not answer quickly. His silence was answer enough. Caleb's jaw tightened. The Red Valley people lived beyond the ridge, and every rancher in town had a story about them. Some true, some twisted by fear, some built from hate. Caleb had never cared to learn which was which. Tahu lifted the cup but didn't drink. "I did not come to bring trouble." Caleb gave a dry laugh. "Trouble usually says that before it walks through the door." Tahu looked at him then, not angry, just tired. "Then I will leave." He tried to stand, but his knees nearly failed. Caleb caught him by the arm before he fell. Under the torn blanket, Caleb saw bruises across his shoulder and marks from ropes on his wrists. No blood, no open wounds, but enough to tell a story. Caleb's voice lowered. "Who did this?" Tahu pulled his arm back. "Men from your town." Caleb's face changed. "Which men?" Tahu looked toward the window where lightning flashed white across the glass. "The ones who said I stole a horse. The ones who wanted someone to blame." Caleb felt the room grow colder. There had been talk in town about a missing horse. A wealthy rancher named Silas Boone had accused tribe riders before anyone had even searched the land. Caleb had heard the accusation and said nothing. Now the accusation was sitting in front of his fire, shaking from cold, wearing the truth on his wrists. Before Caleb could ask more, a sound cut through the storm, distant hooves. Not one horse, several. Caleb moved to the window and blew out the lantern. Darkness swallowed the cabin. Tahu stood quickly, fear returning to his face. Caleb raised one hand, warning him to stay silent. The hooves came closer, then stopped outside the cabin fence. Men's voices carried through the rain. Caleb recognized one immediately. Silas Boone, rich rancher, hard eyes, smooth lies. A man who smiled in church and broke men behind barns. "Rourke!" Boone shouted. "Open up!" Caleb looked at Tahu, then toward the door. For 1 second he saw the choice clearly. If he gave the stranger up, Boone would ride away, and Caleb's quiet life would stay quiet. If he protected him, the town would call him traitor before sunrise. Boone knocked hard with the butt of a rifle. "We know he came this way." Caleb picked up his own rifle and walked to the door. "Who?" he called. Boone laughed from outside. "Don't play dumb. A thief from the tribe. Dangerous man. Hand him over." Caleb glanced at Tahu. The stranger's face had gone still, as if he had already accepted his fate. That made Caleb angrier than begging would have. He opened the door halfway, standing in the gap like a wall. Rain struck his face. Boone sat on horseback with 4 men behind him, all armed, all wearing the confidence of men who thought the law belonged to them. Boone leaned forward. "Evening, Caleb. We're just here for what's ours." Caleb's voice was calm. "A man ain't a thing." Boone's smile faded. "Careful." Caleb looked past him at the other riders. "You got proof he stole that horse?" Boone's eyes hardened. "I got my word." Caleb nodded slowly. "That used to mean something. Not tonight." Silence fell between them, sharp as a blade. Boone's hand moved near his gun, but Caleb did not blink. Then Boone smiled again, colder now. "Sunrise, Rourke. We'll come back with the marshal. And if that man is still inside—" He looked at the cabin, then back at Caleb. "You'll answer with him." Riders turned and vanished into the storm. Caleb shut the door. Tahu stared at him. "Why did you do that?" Caleb looked at the dying fire. "Because maybe I'm tired of letting the wrong men decide who's guilty." The storm did not pass that night. It grew heavier, as if the sky itself had decided to stay and watch what would happen next. Inside the cabin, the fire burned low, casting long shadows that moved slowly across the walls like silent witnesses. Caleb sat near the table, his rifle resting across his knees, eyes fixed on the door. Tahu sat on the floor near the fire, wrapped in the dry blanket, but sleep did not come to either of them. After a long silence, Caleb spoke. "If what you said is true, they'll bring more than words at sunrise." Tahu nodded slightly. "They will not come for truth. They will come for power." Caleb looked at him carefully. "Then tell me the truth now. Why are they really hunting you?" Tahu hesitated. The firelight flickered across his face, revealing something deeper than fear, something heavier. "Because I did not follow them." Caleb frowned. "Follow who?" Tahu looked into the flames. "Your town's men came to our land 3 nights ago. Not all of them, just a few. Boone was with them. They crossed the ridge without warning. They said they came to trade, but they brought no goods." Caleb's jaw tightened. "They asked about the old trails," Tahu continued. "The hidden paths through the valley, the ones our elders keep secret. When we refused, they grew angry. They said the land would belong to them soon anyway." Caleb leaned forward slightly. "And the horse?" Tahu shook his head. "There was no stolen horse. It was a story they created, so they could come back with weapons and not questions." The cabin fell silent again. Caleb exhaled slowly. "So this ain't about a horse?" Tahu looked at him. No. It's about taking land. Tahu nodded. And removing anyone who stands in the way. Caleb leaned back in his chair, eyes dark now. He had seen this before, not here but in other towns, other valleys. Men like Boone didn't steal openly. They created reasons first. Then they made those reasons sound like justice. And now Caleb had stepped between them. The night stretched long, heavy with waiting. Outside, the storm finally began to weaken, but the silence it left behind felt worse. Just before dawn, Caleb stood up and walked to the door. The sky was beginning to lighten, a pale gray spreading across the horizon. He opened the door slightly and looked out. The land was still. Too still. "They'll come soon," he said quietly. Tahu stood behind him. "Then I should leave." Caleb turned sharply. "And go where?" Tahu didn't answer. Caleb shook his head. "If you step out there now, you won't make it past the ridge." Tahu looked down. "Then I will not bring this fight to your home." Caleb's voice hardened. "It's already here." For a moment, neither man spoke. Then, from far across the valley, a different sound appeared. Not like Boone's men. These hooves were slower, more measured, more controlled. Caleb narrowed his eyes, stepping out onto the porch. In the distance, figures began to appear through the fading mist. Not 5, not 10. Dozens. Riders, silent, moving as one. Tahu stepped beside him and froze. "They came," he whispered. Caleb glanced at him. "Your people?" Tahu nodded slowly. The riders approached without shouting, without rushing. They spread out across the land, forming a wide arc around the cabin, but not like an attack, like protection. Caleb felt something shift inside him. These were not raiders, not hunters. They were guardians. Moments later, another group appeared from the opposite side, the direction of the town. Boone and his men had returned, this time with more riders and the town marshal among them. They slowed as they saw the figures already surrounding the cabin. Boone's confidence cracked for the first time. The marshal spoke first, his voice cautious. "Caleb, what is this?" Caleb stepped forward, standing between both sides. "Looks like the truth showed up before you did." Boone's eyes burned with anger. "You brought them here?" Caleb shook his head. "No." Tahu stepped forward slowly, raising his hands, not in surrender, but in peace. "They came for me," he said. The riders behind him remained silent, but their presence was enough. Their faces were calm, their posture steady. No one reached for a weapon. Boone laughed bitterly. "So now you hide behind them?" Tahu met his gaze. "No, I stand with them." The marshal looked between both sides, clearly unsure. "Boone, you said this man was alone." Boone's voice sharpened. "He is a thief." Before anyone else could speak, an older rider from Tahu's side moved forward. His presence carried weight, authority. He spoke calmly, but every word landed heavy. There was no theft. Boone opened his mouth, but the elder continued. "You crossed our land without permission. You demanded what was not yours, and when you were refused, you chose lies instead of truth." The silence that followed was deep and undeniable. The marshal looked at Boone. "Is that true?" Boone hesitated, just for a second, but that second was enough. Caleb saw it, and so did everyone else. The balance had shifted, not with violence, but with truth standing in the open. And for the first time, Boone had nowhere to hide. The silence that followed felt heavier than any gunfight. No one moved. No one reached for a weapon. The wind carried dust slowly between the two sides, like the land itself was holding its breath. Caleb stood at the center between Boone's men and the riders of Red Valley. He could feel both worlds pressing against him, the one he came from and the one he had chosen to stand beside. The marshal cleared his throat. We're not here to start a war. The elder from Tahu's side answered calmly, Neither are we. Boone shifted in his saddle, anger tightening his face. This is nonsense, he snapped. You're all letting a thief twist the story. Caleb spoke before anyone else could. Then prove it. Boone turned sharply. What? Prove he stole your horse, Caleb said, his voice steady. Show us something real, not words, not stories. Proof. Boone opened his mouth, but nothing came. The marshal looked at him again, slower this time. Boone, do you have any evidence? Boone's jaw clenched. I don't need evidence. Everyone knows how these people... That's enough, the marshal cut in, his voice firm now. The air shifted. The moment had come. Not a fight of guns, but of truth. Tahu stepped forward again, his voice quiet but clear. Your men came to our land. You demanded our paths. You threatened our elders. When we refused, you chose to create a lie. Boone laughed harshly. And now you think standing here changes anything? Tahu didn't raise his voice. No. Truth does not change because we stand. It simply reveals what was always there. The elder beside him added, and today, it reveals you. Boone's hand twitched near his gun, but he didn't draw. Because for the first time, he was outnumbered. Not by weapons, by witnesses. The marshal slowly stepped his horse forward, placing himself slightly ahead of Boone. Silas Boone, he said, his tone measured. You brought armed men onto another people's land based on a claim you cannot prove. Boone's anger cracked into something more desperate. You're taking their side now? The marshal shook his head. No, I'm taking the side of what I can see. He looked around, the calm riders, the steady silence, the man who had come seeking shelter instead of hiding. Then he looked back at Boone. And right now, I see a man who started something he can't finish. Boone's eyes burned, but his confidence was gone. Caleb watched it happen, the shift. The same man who had ridden in with certainty now sat surrounded by doubt. Boone pointed toward the cabin. That man is still guilty. Caleb stepped forward, standing beside Tahu now, not in front of him, not protecting him like before, but standing with him. Then you're accusing me too, Caleb said. Boone frowned. What? Caleb's voice didn't shake. Because I saw him last night. I gave him shelter, and if he was guilty, I'd be standing here lying with him. The marshal looked between them. Caleb, are you telling me this man did not steal anything? Caleb met his eyes. I'm telling you I've seen guilty men before, and he ain't one of them. The elder nodded once. That was enough. The marshal took a long breath, then turned back to Boone. This ends here. Boone stared at him. You're making a mistake. The marshal's voice hardened. No, you did. When you thought your word was enough to bury someone else. For a moment, Boone looked like he might still fight it. Then he saw the riders. He saw the silence. He saw the truth standing where fear used to be. And slowly,